Hi there guys, Sunqual here. Welcome back to the Dawson's YouTube channel. Back again here with a Studio One tutorial. Now, in this series, we've been looking at some of the more creative features of Studio One in terms of design for sound and for mixing, and also in this case for compositional kind of activities. Now, I am a fusion and jazz guitar player, kind of straying into the shred territory here. I am not an electronic music guy at all. So excuse the banal nature of what I'm about to show you in terms of how it sounds, but it's to demonstrate a very cool concept within Studio One known as the chord track. Now, this is a very unique feature within Studio One that really has an insane amount of power. Now, I'm using Studio One Pro version 4.6 here, but if you're using an earlier version, I think it's 3.5 onwards or even 3 onwards, you'll have this feature. But if you buy a newer piece of Studio One hardware, one of their audio interfaces, or the Atom or the fader port, you will have access to Studio One Artist, which will give you this kind of feature as well. So it's very cool. So what is the chord track? Okay, now along this top row of icons here, there's a few different tracks that give you various different functions. So for instance, we've got here the tempo track. We've also got the arranger track. There's the marker track, and there's our automation and all sorts of other bits and pieces. And just here, we have our chord track. Now, what the chord track does is allow us to create a master series of chords that everything below, provided we tell it to, will follow. And this is so powerful because what it will do is it will manipulate both MIDI or piano roll data and, incredibly, audio data, stereo audio files, polyphonic stereo audio files. It will manipulate them and it will pitch those up or down to match whatever our chord track is doing. This is incredibly powerful, and really the easiest way to do this is just to show you how it works. So here I have a very banal, very boring, really sad kind of thing. It's just basically an A minor 7, so the key of A minor, and it just goes like this. It's the same thing 4 times. So if I just show you really quickly, we've got this little kind of arpeggiated part. We've got a very simple bass line and then a pad that's playing an A minor 7 chord. Okay, and that is going to give us this if I just rewind. Okay, so very dull, very boring. Now, if I was really working kind of very diligently, what I could do is I could go in here and I could take the same parts and I could edit them and I could shift the notes around to change the chords, so on and so forth. Now that's cool if you know what you're doing. However, you might struggle to know what notes are in certain chords, for instance, or if you just want to work really quickly and efficiently, there is a much faster way to work. Now what you can do is, let's take this pad part. That's playing a definite chord, as you can see. We've got this chord going on here. Now, if you don't know what that chord is, Studio One can figure it out for you. So I'm just going to close my piano roll there. If you right-click on this region and you say extract to chord track, which you will find, I've got it in my recent items here. If you go to, in this case, the instrument part here, this menu here. So what I've done is right-click on this, or control-click on a Mac, go to instrument parts, and you will see extract to chord track here. Okay, so if you click on that, aha, there we have an A minor 7. So what Studio One has done is it's figured out what that chord is, and it's got it correct, of course, and it says it's an A minor 7, and it's populated that in our chord track here. Now, if you did know what the chord was, what you could actually do is you could double click in this area, and it will create a chord region. And these can be, just like any other region, dragged to be sort of across as many bars or beats as you like, really. And if you double click on this region, this chord selector window opens up, which has got a ton of different chords in here. It's basically in the cycle of fourths or fifths, depending on which way around you go. And you can see on the outside, we have our major chords. In the inside, we have our relative minor chords. So the relative minor of C major is A minor. And then we have on the right-hand side, our different intervals. So we can do a dominant 7th or a minor 7th or a major 7th. And then we can select extensions like flat 9s, sharp 11s, flat 13s, so on and so forth. We can then select a bass note. So we could have, for instance, C. Let's just undo that 7 with E in the bass. Very cool. So inversions, basically, we can select our root note. that way, and then we can select our different types of chords. So we could have sus chords or diminished triads, augmented triads, power chords even, which is very cool if you're doing more rock-based stuff. And then along the top here, we have this button to move between our different chords, and we can either select them manually or we can use this button just here. We also have the function here to have an instrument input, so we can select and play my MIDI keyboard here. And this will tell us what chords we're playing. It's in the wrong octave at the moment, as you can hear. So that's quite useful as well. And we can audition chords as well when we click on them. Very cool. Now you can change the sound for the audition chords, but I'm not going to show you how to do that right now. Now I'm just going to close this window down. Now, why is this useful? Okay, well, let's just remove this this particular chord. So let's delete that particular chord. Now I'm going to select all of these regions, and I'm going to go right click, and you'll see this extract a chord track in your recent items if you've used it recently, or go down to instrument parts, extract to chord track. Now you'll see that all the chords have been populated by their relevant chord types. Now, if we load up the inspector here, we will see an option here for each of our tracks called Follow Chords. Okay, now at the moment it's off for all of our tracks, but if we click on this disclosure triangle, we have three different options: parallel, narrow, and bass. Now, what parallel will do is it's going to pick whatever I select as my chord here. It's going to move the voices in my MIDI regions here, or actually in my audio tracks as well, which is fairly scary, up to or down to whatever chord I pick here, but it's going to move the same inversion. Okay, now if you don't know what chord inversions are, they're arrangements of notes within a chord. So say for instance this A minor 7, it has a root, a flat third, a fifth, and a flat 7 as its intervals. Well, if we have the root note in the bass, that's a root position inversion. If we have the third in the bass, that's a first inversion, because the third is the lowest note. Now, we can do multiple different inversions for every single chord. If there's 3 notes in the chord, we get 3 inversions. If there's 4 notes in the chord, 4 inversions, so on and so forth. Go and check that out for music theory on the internet. Somewhere you will find something about chord inversions. The point with parallel is it's going to move up or down to the same inversion. So that means you get parallel movement. So that can sometimes sound a little bit it can sound like it's jumping around depending on the distance between the chords. What narrow will do is it will change the inversion to move the notes the least amount required to fit the new chord. And then bass is obviously for bass movement. So this pad here that we've got, if we solo this a second, if we listen to it, it might make sense for that particular part to move in a parallel fashion, let's say. So let's click on Follow Chords and do parallel. Okay. Now what's going to happen is if we just solo this now, this is an A minor 7 at the moment. If I double click on this, I can change this to anything I want. Let's change it to an F major 7. Now, if you look at the MIDI data here, you can see it's changed. And now if I play, it's changed to an F major 7, and I didn't have to do anything to the MIDI data. If I want a C minor 7, very, very cool indeed. And you can see on my chord track here, you can see the chords down the left-hand side as well as I'm doing this with the chord selector. If I click on my track again, we get the inspector for our track. Go back to the chord selector, start changing chords. Very, very simple to do. Okay, so let's go back to A minor 7 here. Okay. So now our MIDI data is returned to where it was. Let's also select the bass here and go Follow Chords, Bass. Let's select our little arpeggiated part, Follow Chords, and let's go narrow. Okay, so now I don't want to change anything here because I want this to be an A minor 7 to start with, so we end up with this. But what I want to do in my second chord here is I want to go to a D minor 7. Okay, now, of course, I could go in and if I knew the notes that were in a D minor 7, which I do, but if you didn't, you could just use the chord selector. So we select this particular chord, and then we select D minor. 7 is already selected. It's updated in our chord track, and you can see our MIDI data has shifted and the bass line's gone to D. If we double click on this, we're now on the note D. Okay, now if we play this, you're going to hear the chord change. Very, very cool and very easy to do indeed. Let's close down our piano roll. Now, obviously for the arpeggiator here, I selected narrow. Let's try parallel for this particular part, and let's try shifting to narrow for our pad part and see what the difference is. Now, of course, I'm not doing this to the drums because there's no pitch information with the drums that's of any relevance harmonically. Very cool. Just to show you one more example, let's do both of these tracks on narrow. This tends to be my preferred option for a lot of things because this utilizes what's called voice leading, and it's our ears are generally pleased by voice leading as opposed to where the notes don't change too much. Big jumps are less pleasing for our ears. I think that sounds great. Let's now go to an F major for this particular chord. So again, we can double click on it. Let's go to F, and we'll go to F major 7. And then for this particular chord, what I want to do is I want to go to a G. This is the 5 chord in the key of C major, and I want a sus4, G7 sus4. Okay, so now we've got this sound. And again, we've used narrow motion for these two parts, and we've clicked bass for the bass part. Now we go to F major 7 to G7 sus4. So without all the talking that I've been doing, this literally takes seconds to do, and it's really useful because we can play with this quite a lot. So for instance, what I might want to do here instead, so instead of the G7 sus4, let's double click on that, and what I want to do instead is I want to select what's called the 5 chord of this E minor 7. So I'm actually going to select E. Let's get rid of this sus4 and go to major. And if you control click, you can select, or shift click, I should say, sorry, not control click. You can select multiple different intervals here. So I've got an E7 flat 9. Okay, now, if we audition that chord on its own, it sounds pretty rough, but actually it leads back to A minor 7 beautifully. So we get this now, and it was so quick and easy to do this. Very, very cool indeed. Now, what I'm also going to do here is I'm going to change things up a little bit more. And instead of the D minor 7, I'm actually going to go for an A flat dominant 7th with a sharp 11. Okay, so let's have a listen to how that sounds. And again, this is quite a complex chord. And to actually figure this out for some of you guys might have been quite tricky, but to just do this with the chord track is really quick, very easy, very experimental, very cool. Now we got something completely different. It's so easy. And then we could maybe here, instead of F major 7, we could go for a G, where are we? G13. Okay, let's add the 7th in there as well. And there we go. So now we've got this. We're getting a little bit too jazzy probably for most people's tastes. Let's bring the pad back in. Okay, so final thing I'm going to do here, just grab parallel here. Let's just double click on this particular section here. So, you know, we'll have a listen to this, but this shows you kind of the power of this and how simple it is to do this. And of course, we could split this as well and add in, you know, we could do this, for instance, move these chords a little bit earlier, whatever we wanted to do. So let's bring that forwards. No, we'll leave it as it is, but you get the idea. You can move these around. So let's have a listen. So there you go, guys. It's really, really straightforward to use. It does also work really well with audio. Now, if you ever wanted to utilize this, I don't have something really quickly at hand here, but if I was just to remove this stuff here, just delete all of that stuff. And I'm going to delete my chords here as well. You can select those in the normal way, hit delete, it's all gone. By the way, at any point you don't want your chord track to, or your regions to follow your chord track, you can switch it off there and it will stop utilizing the chord track. Now, if I just go to my loops here, nothing pre-prepared here. So let's just grab something piano related, I guess. Let's go for keyboard loops. I don't know what we're going to get here. Let's find something that works really well. Perfect. Okay, let's drag that into there. Right. Now, at the moment, there's no chords in the chord track, but if you right click on this and you go to audio and then, where are we? Over here, detect chords. See here in the region below, it's actually detected what those chords are. Now, if you right click again, you can actually go to, if we go to audio again, extract to chord tracks. Okay, there we go. So now our audio region, if we just, by the way, a little trick you can do, if you ever want your loop to be just around this particular region, if you select it, press Shift P, your region will be just around that particular loop. So we've got this loop now. If we just play it, I'll go back to the beginning. So this is an audio loop, as you can see. You can see it's actually a waveform here, but I can actually change these chords now. So say, for instance, at the end here, instead of E minor, if I double click on this, if we wanted E7 again, so I'm actually going to click on major 7th, okay? So let's, well, we won't put the flat 9 in for now. So now we've got... Okay, now you notice nothing happened. It just played the E minor again. That's because I haven't got follow chords on. So now what we need to do is we need to have that follow chords on. So let's go narrow to start with. Now you get a couple more options with audio. You can see we've got scale and universal as well. So you can check those out. It's worth experimenting with all of these to see what they do. So that's amazing. It just basically created an E7 chord from this stereo audio file. Now, again, I could come in and I could change things. If you change too far, obviously because it's working with audio, things get a little bit difficult. You know, you might hear some weird kind of issues with your audio. It can't work pure magic, so it has to work within the limits of physics. But now we've got this F. Does a pretty good job. You can hear some weirdness going on at the beginning, but it's doing a remarkably impressive job considering what I'm asking it to do here. So when that's buried within a track and you've got all the other MIDI data going on at the same time or all the other audio data, you'll find it's actually really, really successful. So that is the power of the chord track, guys. Again, you can get a lot more in depth with this, just as you can with effects chains and multi-instruments and the splitter and so on and so forth. But it's pretty remarkable what you can do with this particular tool. It's incredibly powerful, both as a compositional tool and arranging tool, and just for messing around with ideas, just seeing, you know, that whole thing where you're in a writing situation, someone goes, what would happen if we did a C chord there instead of an A minor? You can do that very easily now, very, very easily indeed. So as usual, guys, if you click the link in the description below, you can check out all the PRESONUS hardware that we sell at Dawson's Music that comes free with Studio One artists. So if you want to get into the Studio One DAW world, you can get it free with any PRESONUS hardware from Dawson's Music. Very cool. It's going to save you about £85 on purchasing that separately. As ever, if you found this useful and you enjoyed this video, make sure you click the like and subscribe buttons below and hit the bell notification icon to make sure you don't miss any more of our videos ever again. All right, guys, my name's Tom Quayle. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.